Hi, Lee Phillips here. Yeah, I'm doing another YouTube video. I'm still a lawyer. Don't hold that against me. I have with me Ben Rucker. Ben and I work together. He's an accountant, so technically we can't be in the same office, but we kind of collaborate on stuff. Ben is actually a former IRS agent. He was a special auditor for the IRS. And my question for Ben is going to be, what do I want? How do I choose a tax guy? Do I want an enrolled agent? What's that? Do I want a CPA? What's that? Do I want a tax lawyer? What's that? So what's the difference between those three, Ben?
All right, but don't hold it against me that I worked at the IRS for 8 years, 7.5 years.
You're getting the tax from the dark side.
All right, so that's actually a good question. And it's almost like going to a doctor. How do you know what doctor's good? You ask your friends.
You hope you live through the medical exam.
Right? But you really don't know if a doctor's good or not, because you don't know enough about medicine to say, hey, this guy's good. He's giving me he's recommending the right medication for me. He's making the right diagnosis.
You trust him.
Yeah, you're trusting him because you don't know if the medicine's good or not, right? And it's the same thing with accountants. Is you're just trusting them, you're taking their word for it, and you're relying on the opinion of your friends of recommending that account. Unfortunately, in the tax field, the accountants that get the tax bill the lowest, they get recommended the most. And usually, those guys are the ones that don't know anything about taxes, and they take all sorts of deductions that they have no idea how to take.
Shortcuts.
Yeah, they don't know. They have no clue what to do on it, right? And so, I can give you an example of that. A guy came to me last week and he says, hey, I've got this tax return from my accountant. It's a partnership. Can you help me? My friend recommended you and said you know a lot more about taxes. And so we looked at the return. Had this guy gotten audited, he would have owed $30,000 in taxes. We did the return. We still saved him $7,000, but if he gets audited, he's not going to owe that $30,000 because we did it right. You know, and there's past years where that accountant had the tax returns lower than we would have had, but had he been audited, it would have been a huge problem.
So what's the difference between the enrolled agent, accountant, and a
CPA?
CPA.
So an enrolled agent is licensed directly by the IRS. To get that credential, you have to pass a 3-part exam that the IRS issues. It's proctored at the same testing center as a CPA exam. The CPA exam is a 4-part section. One of the 4 parts covers tax, and a lot of it is on financial statements, and it's related to publicly traded companies, GAAP. So the difference is an EA specializes in tax, whereas a CPA specializes more in financial accounting. And
so the EA knows more about taxes than the CPA?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've met. When I worked at the IRS, Lee, I've met a lot of CPAs that don't know anything about taxes. I can't recall a single time I met an EA that didn't know a lot about taxes. So if I were to send you to a random person, I would say your best bet is to go with an EA and then a CPA next. The CPA is regulated by the AICPA, and they've done a really good job at marketing that license. Everybody thinks CPAs know everything about taxes, and quite frankly, most of them know very little about taxes, and most of them can't pass the EA exam if they tried.
How about the tax lawyer? What's he do?
The tax lawyer takes 1 or 2 tax classes in law school and then markets himself as a tax attorney, right? So my experience when I was working at the IRS fighting against taxpayers who hired EAs, CPAs, or attorneys was that the EAs, they provided the best representation. They knew the tax law the most. And then second choice was CPA, and the bottom of the barrel, believe it or not. I don't want to hurt your feelings, Lee. But the tax attorneys actually knew very little about tax, and they got bulldozed in most of the audits.
Okay.
So, and the sad part is they were charging the highest fees too. For the representation. That's how it works, right?
That's how it works. That's really good.
So,
you did hear about the enrolled agent, the CPA, and the tax attorney that the client asked, what's 2 plus 2?
No. Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
You know, the enrolled agent and the CPA say, well, it's for, you stupid idiot? And the attorney, he goes, brings the client into his office. He goes over, he pulls down the drapes, and he shuts the door, and he says, well, what do you want it to be? So
that's how attorneys think, though, right?
basically. So enrolled agent's probably where I'm going to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, they have to, like I said, it's a 3-part exam. They have to do continuing education and all of the.
Are you an enrolled agent?
I am.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So yeah, all of the continuing education has to be.
Tax related.
Yeah, it has to be tax related except an ethics portion. So believe it or not, if you have a certain.
Attorneys fail the ethics portion.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, right, for everybody.
Any rate.
So you actually get your enrolled agent license automatically if you work a certain amount of years at the IRS. So I got my license in the mail and it said limited to audit representation only. So in the IRS, you want to represent clients for collection, which means they owe taxes, and also for audit representation if they're getting audited. So I was only able to represent them for the audit side, and it's like, man, I want to represent for everything. So I went down and I actually took the test. I tried to take it in 3 days, or in the same day, and they said, no, you're only allowed to take 1 part per day. So it's over 3 days.
Okay, so enrolled agent, probably yes. CPA, depends on the dude. And the lawyer, forget it.
Forget it.
Okay, this is Lee Phillips.
You know what? Hey, Lee, I do want to say one thing.
Okay.
If you're being criminally charged by the IRS,
then you better get your lawyer. Your lawyer.
You better get a lawyer, right?
Right. So they'll do the criminal part. Don't get in the criminal part with the IRS, though, all right? Lee Phillips and Ben Rucker talking on CPAs, enrolled agents, and tax lawyers.